The night began like any normal wrap day on a film set. The crew was tired. The lights were cooling down, and the quiet hallway of the hotel felt peaceful after a long shoot. No one expected anything unusual. No one imagined the night would test the strength of two people who were always seen as unbreakable on screen. Keanu Reeves walked through the corridor with slow steps. He was calm as always, greeting every crew member he passed. He noticed smiles, yawns, laughter, and the soft relief that came when work finally ended. But something inside him felt slightly off, like a missing sound in a familiar song. He could not explain it yet, but he felt it. Sandra Bullock had left the set earlier than usual. She said she needed rest. Everyone accepted it because she always carried her work with grace and never complained. No one questioned her silence. No one looked closer into her eyes that day. No one except Keanu. He remembered the way she spoke before leaving. Her voice was soft, but there was a slight tremble hidden in it. She said she was fine, yet her eyes said something different, something tired, something holding weight. Keanu had learned to read the difference between a real smile and a safe smile. Sandra had given the safe smile. He moved toward his room but paused. Something told him to check on her, not as a co-star, not as a friend only, but as a human who understood silent pain. He turned away from his door and walked toward the elevator. The hotel was quiet. No music, no footsteps. Only the soft hum of distant air conditioning. When he reached Sandra's floor, he noticed her door slightly open. Not enough to look suspicious, just enough to feel wrong. Her phone was on the table inside, glowing with unread messages. Her jacket was still on the chair. Her shoes were on the floor. Sandra was gone. Keanu called her name once, gently. No answer. He looked around, checked the hallway. Nothing. There was no panic in him, but there was concern. He had seen people carry private storms before. Some storms are loud, others are silent, and the silent ones are often the most dangerous. He walked slowly toward the emergency exit. The door was open only a few inches, letting in a small current of cold night air. He pushed it wider and felt the wind hit his face. The stairs led up to the rooftop. The metal handle was cold like the night itself. He climbed the stairs one step at a time. No sound except his own footsteps and the city air brushing against the walls. The door at the top was unlocked. A soft creak echoed when he opened it. The rooftop was wide, quiet, and painted with city lights. And there she was. Sandra stood near the edge of the rooftop wall. She was not crying. She was not moving. She was simply standing, holding herself like someone who had been strong for far too long. The city below her was alive, loud, bright, but up here everything felt still. Keanu did not run. He did not call her name. He knew the moment was fragile like a glass heartbeat. He walked toward her slowly, each step soft and careful. He stopped a few feet behind her. She finally spoke, not turning around. "I just needed quiet," she said, voice low, almost disappearing into the wind. Keanu replied with calm honesty, "I understand." There was a long pause, but not an awkward one. It was a pause filled with unspoken truth, like both of them already knew this moment was not about fixing anything. It was about seeing the pain that no camera ever captured. Sandra took a slow breath. Her hands were cold. Her mind was heavier than any script she ever read. She had spent months pretending everything was fine, carrying grief that never got a voice. Loss is strange. It does not always break people in public. Sometimes it waits until they are alone in a quiet room, or standing on a rooftop in the middle of the night. "Everyone keeps saying I am strong," she said softly. "But I feel tired of being strong." Keanu listened. He did not interrupt. He did not try to comfort her with fast words. He knew the real comfort is not in answers, but in presence. Sandra kept speaking slowly, letting the truth breathe. "I thought if I came up here, the silence would help me breathe again. But it only reminded me how alone I feel sometimes." Keanu stepped a little closer, but not too close. "You are not alone," he said gently. She turned her head slightly, enough to feel he was near. Her eyes were not tearful, but full of weight. "You did not have to come," she whispered. Keanu looked at her with quiet sincerity. "I know, that is why I came." The rooftop wind grew stronger. The air felt colder, but something between them grew warmer. Not romance, not pity, something deeper. The kind of connection built on shared silence and honest presence. Keanu sat down on the floor near her, not touching, not pulling, just sitting. A simple act that said more than any speech ever could. He took off his jacket and placed it gently beside her, not forcing her to wear it, just giving her the choice. That is what respect feels like. Not control, not rescue, just choice. Minutes passed, maybe 20, maybe 60. Time lost meaning. The city lights flickered below like constellations trying to talk. Sandra finally lowered herself and sat beside him. She still said nothing, and he still did not ask. Because some pain does not need words. It only needs someone who refuses to walk away from it. After a while, she looked at him again, this time with a small breath of relief in her voice. "How did you know I needed someone to stay?" she asked. Keanu answered with a calm truth. "Because I have been there too." That moment did not fix everything. It did not erase her grief, but it removed the loneliness wrapped around it. And sometimes, that is the first real step back to life. They sat together in silence again. 2 people, 2 hearts, 1 quiet rooftop, and a night that held more emotion than any scene they ever acted. The wind softened. The city began to slow. The night started changing into early morning, and the sky began to hint at blue. But they did not move, because she was still breathing through the storm, and he was still staying. The city was still half asleep when the sky began to soften from black to dark blue. The rooftop air felt different now. Not as sharp, not as heavy. It was the quiet hour between night and morning, when even pain feels slower and thoughts sound less like storms and more like echoes. Keanu and Sandra were still sitting side by side. Neither of them had spoken for a long time, yet nothing about the silence felt uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that exists only between 2 people who no longer feel the need to pretend. Sandra's breathing had become steadier. Her hands were no longer shaking. The weight was still there, but it was no longer crushing her. It had shifted just a little because someone else was now holding a piece of it with her. Keanu watched the sky the way he watched life itself, with calm awareness. He was not thinking about what to say next. He was not planning a speech. He did not want to fix her sadness. He only wanted her to feel safe while carrying it. Finally, Sandra spoke. Her voice was soft, but clearer than before. "I thought I was handling everything well," she said. "But it turns out I was just hiding it better each day." Keanu nodded slowly. Sometimes we call it strength when it is actually silence. She gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah. Silence can feel like strength until it starts choking you." She looked down at her hands and continued. "I kept telling myself to be grateful, to be responsible, to keep going. And I kept thinking I would break only when I got time to break. But time never came. So my mind just carried everything alone." Keanu understood that. He had lived years learning how to sit with pain without letting it swallow him. He looked at her gently and said, "You do not have to schedule your healing." Her eyes softened. "I forget that sometimes." The wind brushed past them again, gentler now, like it was listening too. Keanu asked, "Do you want to tell me what happened, or should I just stay with you in silence?" She took a slow breath. "I want to tell you. I think I finally can." And she began. She spoke about the loss she had kept hidden. Someone she loved deeply was gone, and she never spoke about it in interviews or public events. The world saw her smiling, laughing, working, accepting awards. They saw her strength, not her grief. She explained how she had been waking up every night with her chest heavy, pretending it was just tiredness. How she forced herself to act normal so the world would not worry. How she smiled in interviews while her heart felt numb. How every room she walked into felt a little louder, while her mind felt a little quieter. "I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping it to myself," she said. "But I was the one drowning." Keanu listened fully, not interrupting once. He knew when someone is pouring out emotions they have carried alone for months, the worst thing you can do is rush them. Every word she spoke was a release, a slow untying of knots inside her. Sandra looked at him and said, "You know what the worst part was? I kept thinking I would disappoint people if they saw me weak. I kept acting like I was okay because I did not want anyone to worry." Keanu replied gently, "You do not disappoint anyone by being human." She took in his words like someone who had not heard something truthful in a long time. The sky brightened. The sharp night wind softened into morning air. The city lights below were fading as street vendors, drivers, and early workers began their day. Sandra wiped her face slowly, not from tears but from exhaustion. "I was so close to breaking tonight," she whispered. "Not because I wanted to end anything, but because I did not want to pretend anymore." Keanu nodded. "You did not break. You let the truth speak. That is strength." She looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "If you had not come up here, I think I would still be standing alone in that corner, feeling like the world was miles away." Keanu replied in the calmest voice, "I did not come to save you. I came so you would not feel alone in the dark." That sentence hit her heart in the quietest, deepest way. Nobody had stayed for her like that in a long time. No questions, no advice, no solutions, just presence. She whispered, "How did you know I needed someone tonight?" Keanu looked at the sky again and replied, "Because I learned a long time ago that the strongest people are often the ones who break in silence, and I saw that silence in your eyes today." Those words created a stillness around them that felt almost sacred. For the first time in months, Sandra felt safe enough to breathe without acting strong. The rooftop did not feel like an escape anymore. It felt like a place where she was seen. Keanu slowly got up and stretched his legs. Sandra did the same, moving slowly, like someone who had carried stone for hours and was finally putting it down. They both stood near the railing now, watching the soft blue of the morning swallow the last of the night. After a moment, Sandra asked, "Do you think it ever gets easier?" Keanu thought for a second, then answered, "I think life does not always get lighter, but sometimes we grow stronger shoulders. And sometimes we find people who help us carry the weight." She breathed in, long and full. It did not solve anything instantly, but it was the first breath that did not feel controlled. The hotel below them was waking up. Distant doors clicked, elevators beeped, voices began to move through the building. Life was returning, but the rooftop moment remained untouched, like a secret the world would never know. Sandra finally turned to Keanu and said, "Thank you for not leaving," Keanu replied. "Some people need words. Some people need space. Some people just need someone to stay." I stayed. Her eyes lowered, but her heart lifted. They walked back toward the rooftop door, slowly, side by side. Not like Hollywood stars, not like scripted characters, but like two humans who understood each other beyond fame. As they reached the stairs, Sandra paused. She did not say the line yet, but she felt it forming inside her. The words were waiting. The whisper was coming. Not yet, but soon. The hallway felt warmer than the rooftop, but the quiet between them stayed the same. There was no rush to speak, no pressure to explain anything more. The night had already broken open what needed to be opened, and the morning was now holding it gently. They walked slowly down the stairs, not because they were tired, but because neither of them wanted the moment to end too soon. The rooftop had been a place of truth, and stepping back into the world felt like returning to a place where masks existed again. When they reached the hotel floor, the silence of early morning wrapped around them. No crew, no noise, just empty walls and carpeted floors soaked in dawn light. Sandra stopped outside her room and rested her hand on the door handle, but she did not open it. Keanu noticed. "You do not have to go in yet," he said softly. She let out a quiet breath. "I know, I just do not feel ready to go back to being normal." Keanu leaned against the wall beside her door, hands in his pockets. "Then do not force normal. Let yourself pause. You earned that." Her eyes lifted toward him, and there was something new in them. Not relief, not joy, just honesty. An honesty that happens only when someone has seen you at your lowest and did not walk away. She leaned against the wall beside him, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Keanu slowly sat beside her, matching her pace without question. They both sat there, backs against the wall, legs stretched out, like two teenagers hiding from the world, even though they were grown adults who spent decades pretending to be unbreakable. After a minute, Sandra said, "I spent so long acting strong for everyone else that I forgot how to be weak for myself." Keanu nodded. "Weakness is not failure. It is just honesty arriving too late." She looked down, smiling lightly. You always talk like a calm philosopher, he shrugged slightly. I just survived enough nights like this to learn things quietly. That sentence made her look at him longer. How many? Keanu paused, then answered with a soft truth. More than I ever told anyone. Sandra could feel it. The understanding between them was not one-sided. He was not just someone who stayed. He was someone who had once needed someone to stay for him too. But maybe no one did. Maybe that is where his strength came from, becoming what he never received. She wanted to ask more, but she stopped herself. Some stories do not need to be spoken to be shared. The first sound of morning footsteps echoed from far away. A hotel cleaner pushing a cart. The world was waking up, but their moment still belonged only to them. Sandra rested her head back against the wall. You know what scares me the most? She asked. Keanu turned slightly toward her. What? That people think I am always okay. And I let them think that. I made myself the strong one. I made it impossible to fall apart in front of anyone. Keanu's voice was low, steady. And yet you fell apart tonight. And nothing broke except the silence. Those words were gentle, but they hit deep. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, It felt like the world was too heavy. I thought if I broke, no one would notice unless it made headlines. And that made me feel invisible in a noisy world. Keanu let her sit with that feeling. Then he said, Pain becomes heavier when you believe you must carry it alone. That is why people collapse in quiet rooms instead of crowded ones. Sandra opened her eyes slowly and looked at him. How did you learn all this? Keanu gave a thin, almost silent smile. By breaking quietly enough times to understand the sound. That answer did not just stay in the air. It settled in her heart. They stayed on the floor for another stretch of time. Not long enough to call it a moment, not short enough to forget. Time was not being measured anymore. Only healing was. A soft knock sounded down the hallway. A late-night staff member delivering bottled water to rooms. Sandra realized she had not eaten or drunk anything in hours. Keanu noticed too. He got up slowly, walked to the vending machine, and returned with 2 water bottles and a packet of crackers. He did not ask her if she was hungry. He just placed the items next to her, letting her choose. She looked at the bottle and smiled faintly. You really do not know how to leave, do you? Keanu sat back down. Not when someone needs company more than words. She opened the bottle and drank slowly. The water tasted like something simple and grounding, like a small reminder that the body also needs care when the mind is tired. She leaned her head back again and said, Movies always show dramatic breakdowns with screaming and throwing things, but real pain is quiet. It just sits in your chest and waits for you to notice it. Keanu nodded. Real pain does not need noise. It needs space. That sentence stayed in her mind like a warm echo. A few minutes later, Sandra spoke again, this time softer. Why did you come after me? You could have gone to your room. You could have slept. No one would have blamed you. Keanu looked at her without hesitation. I did not come because I had answers. I came because I had time. She stared at him, stunned by how much truth could exist in one gentle sentence. Everyone had advice. Everyone had solutions. But almost no one had time. And that is what she needed. Time. Presence. Not rescue. Not comfort disguised as pressure. Just someone who refused to walk away from her breaking point. She looked at him, and something inside her finally loosened. A knot she did not know she had been holding for months. You make it look easy, she said. Being there for someone without taking over. Keanu shook his head slightly. It is not easy. It is just listening without trying to control the ending. The hotel lights brightened. The world was officially awake. Soon, people would step out of rooms. Conversations would rise, cameras would click, and the world would return to its usual speed. But before that happened, Sandra lifted her head, took a slow breath, and finally said a sentence that came from a place deeper than strength. I was not okay tonight. Keanu met her eyes with complete calm. And you did not have to be. Those words were the kind of words that stay in a person's memory forever. She felt something settle in her chest. Not fixed, not healed, but held. She stood up, And Keanu did too. She opened her room door halfway, then turned back toward him. She wanted to say it. The whisper was there. The gratitude. The emotion. The truth. But it was not the right moment yet. Not because she was unsure, but because the healing was still unfolding. Instead, she placed her hand lightly over his and said, "Whatever happens next, thank you for tonight." Keanu nodded gently. "You do not owe me thanks. I stayed because you deserved someone who would." She paused, eyes softer, voice quiet. "That is exactly why you deserve thanks." He nodded again, and this time there was a hint of emotion behind his calm expression. She slowly stepped inside her room, doors still open, but her whisper, the one that would bring tears to his eyes, had not been spoken yet. It was waiting for the right moment, not in darkness, but in the light. Morning arrived fully, not with noise, but with the quiet hum of a new day. Sunlight began slipping through the curtains of hotel windows, reaching the hallways where only hours earlier Sandra and Keanu had sat in silence. The world outside had already started moving again, unaware of the night that had unfolded above it. Sandra stood inside her room, slowly breathing in the morning air. The room looked the same as before, but something inside her felt different. Not fixed, not healed, but steadier. She washed her face, looked in the mirror, and for the first time in months, she did not force a smile. She just looked at herself and allowed the truth to exist without judgment. The silence in her room was not heavy anymore. It was peaceful. And she knew why. Keanu did not save her. He stayed with her. And there is a difference. When someone tries to save you, you feel like a problem. When someone stays, you feel like a person. She sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes longer, letting the stillness settle. The world would soon demand the version of her that smiled in interviews, laughed on set, and seemed endlessly strong. But now she knew she did not have to wear the costume every hour of the day. Down the hallway, Keanu finished a cup of black coffee in his room. He had slept only 2 hours, but he did not feel tired. He had spent years learning that peace does not come from sleep alone, but from doing the right thing when no one is watching. He did not replay the night in his head. He did not wonder if he said the right things or sat the right way. He knew the night was not about perfection. It was about presence. And sometimes presence is enough. By late morning, the crew had gathered in the hotel lobby. Cameras were being packed, schedules were being checked, and assistants were moving with busy energy. Sandra arrived a bit later, walking calmly without makeup or forced smiles. A few people greeted her, expecting the usual spark in her voice, the warm humor she was known for. But today she spoke gently, softly, honestly. And no one realized they were witnessing a quieter, braver version of her. Keanu entered the lobby a few minutes later. He did not look at Sandra right away, and she did not rush to him. There was no scene, no dramatic greeting, no emotional hug. What they shared was not loud enough for the world to notice, but it was strong enough to stay alive in silence. Their eyes met for 1 second. Just one. But in that second, everything that needed to be understood was understood. "Thank you for last night. I am okay today. I am not alone anymore." That was what passed between them. Without words, the director called for a quick production meeting. The movie had reached a heavy emotional scene in the script, one that required deep vulnerability and connection from both Keanu and Sandra. The crew expected them to need time to warm up, maybe even extra rehearsals. But something unexpected happened. When the cameras rolled later that day, Sandra delivered a performance that felt real in a way no acting class could ever teach. Her eyes carried truth, not technique. Her voice carried weight, not lines. Even the extras could feel it. The director whispered, "Where did that come from?" But Keanu knew. It came from the rooftop, from the silence, from the breaking and the staying. During a break, Sandra sat alone on a bench behind the set. Not because she wanted to be isolated, but because she finally felt safe in her own space again. Keanu approached quietly and sat beside her, the same way he had done the night before. He did not ask how she was doing. He already knew the answer. She looked at him and said quietly, "I did not act today. I just felt." Keanu nodded. "That is why it worked." She looked ahead and said, I think I forgot what feeling honestly meant. I have been acting even when the cameras were not rolling. Keanu let that truth sit between them. Then he said, sometimes people perform strength because they think the world will love them only when they are unbreakable. She turned to him, her voice steady but soft. And what about you? What do you do when you break? Keanu paused, not because he was searching for words, but because he was choosing the right ones. I do not break alone anymore. I let the right people see it. For the first time, Sandra understood something deeply. Strength is not hiding the storm. Strength is choosing who gets to witness the lightning. They continued filming through the day, and the crew felt the shift in energy. People talked about how calm the set felt, how focused Sandra seemed, how grounded Keanu was. No one knew why. No one knew about the night on the rooftop, and neither of them planned to tell it. The world sees movies, not moments. The world sees characters, not the people who live inside them. And yet, sometimes, a scene captured on camera is built from a moment no camera ever witnessed. As evening approached, the final shot of the day wrapped. People laughed, stretched, packed equipment. Some planned dinner, some planned sleep, some planned nothing. Sandra walked out to the parking lot where the sky was turning orange and purple. Keanu was already there, leaning against a car, waiting. Not because she expected him to, not because he promised, but because staying had become natural, not forced, not dramatic, just real. She walked over slowly. He looked at her and said, long day. She smiled lightly. Long night, long day, long life, he nodded. But still moving. She breathed in deeply. Still moving. There was a soft pause. She held her bag close to her body, but her shoulders were not heavy anymore. She looked at him, not as a co-star, not as a friend from years of work, but as the one person who refused to let her drown in silence. And for a moment, she almost said it. The whisper. The sentence carrying, all the weight and all the gratitude. But her voice stopped just before it. Formed not yet, not this moment, not in the parking lot. Some words are meant for the exact second the soul is ready to release them. And that second had not arrived. Not yet. The night that was coming would decide it. And when it came, the whisper would finally fall. Not as a thank you for help, but as a thank you for staying when no one else knew they needed to. The sun had already set when Sandra reached her hotel room again. The day had been long, but different from the days before. She was tired, yes, but not in the same way. Her mind was not fighting itself anymore. The silence inside her felt lighter. She stood by the window, watching the city lights below. They did not look distant anymore. They looked alive, connected, part of a world she still belonged to. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it and found Keanu standing there holding 2 cups of tea. No words, no explanations, just a quiet offer. She smiled and stepped back, letting him in. They sat on the floor again, like the night before. No rooftop, no heavy wind, no danger, but the same calm presence stayed between them. Sandra spoke first. You know, people think strength is loud, full of big speeches and heroic moments, but it is not. Keanu nodded slowly. Real strength is quieter. It is choosing to keep living even when no one sees the effort. She looked at the steam rising from her cup. Last night I thought I was disappearing. Today, I felt present again. Not perfect, not healed, just present. And that feels like a beginning. Keanu watched her, not with pity, but respect. That is all recovery ever is. Not a return to who you were, but a slow becoming of who you still can be. She smiled, the kind of smile built from honesty, not performance. You really do have a way with words. Keanu shrugged lightly. I just speak slowly enough to hear what matters. They shared quiet laughter. Not the loud kind, the safe kind. After a moment, Sandra said, Do you ever wonder why life gives us difficult nights? Keanu answered, Maybe so we can learn who stays when they arrive. That sentence stayed with her. It landed deep. Not because it was poetic, but because it was real. They talked a little longer. About nothing heavy, just small things. Films, music, memories, normal life. It felt good to talk without the weight of grief pressing behind every sentence. Eventually, the night grew calm again. Keanu stood up to leave. Sandra walked him to the door, but this time she stopped him before he opened it. She looked at him with gentle eyes. "Last night you stayed because I needed it. Tonight you stayed even when I didn't ask. That means more than you know," Keanu replied softly. "I stayed because you deserved not to face your silence alone." She felt her chest tighten, not with pain this time, but with something softer, something grateful. For a second, her voice almost formed the whisper, almost, but she held it because she knew the final moment had not arrived yet. It was close, very close. The story was one breath away from the sentence that would break him. The last night of filming arrived. The hotel was quieter than usual, as if it sensed something was coming to an end. The cast had finished their scenes. The crew had packed the last cables. And the long days of acting, waiting, pretending, and performing were finally slowing down. Sandra stood on the rooftop again, but this time she was not running from anything. She was simply breathing. The air felt different now. Not heavy, not sharp, not frightening. It felt honest. It felt like the same place where she once broke, but now it was a place where she could stand without shaking. She looked out at the city lights, remembering the night she almost vanished into silence. She remembered the weight in her chest, the fear she could not name, the exhaustion that felt endless, and she remembered who walked through the silence to find her. The rooftop door opened behind her. Quiet footsteps. She did not turn. She already knew who it was. Keanu walked toward her, slow, steady, exactly the way he had before, not trying to fix anything, not trying to start a conversation. Just showing up the way only those who truly care ever do. He stood beside her, looking out at the same view. "You came back," he said softly. She nodded. "I wanted to stand here again, not as the person who broke, but as the person who survived that night." Keanu looked at her, and for the first time, she looked stronger, not because her pain was gone, but because she was no longer carrying it alone. They stood in silence for a while. No wind, no rushed words, no nervous air. Just the quiet truth that some moments in life do not need dialogue at all. After a long pause, Sandra finally turned toward him. Her eyes were steady, her voice calm. "Do you know what the hardest part of that night was?" she asked. Keanu waited. It was not the sadness. It was thinking no one would notice if I drifted away. Keanu did not interrupt. He just listened. She took a slow breath. "But you noticed. You came, you stayed, and you did not ask for a thank you. You just stayed." She stepped a little closer, not dramatic. Just honest. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Thank you for staying." The words were small, but they hit him like a wave. Keanu's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the kind of emotion that comes when a human soul is seen fully, without noise, without cameras, without applause. No one had ever thanked him like that before. Not for acting, not for saving, not for advising, but for staying. He blinked slowly, and a single tear fell. Not a breakdown, not a scene, just a quiet reaction from a heart that rarely lets the world see its softness. Sandra reached out and gently squeezed his hand. Nothing romantic, nothing scripted. Just respect, gratitude, and the deepest kind of human connection, she said softly. "People think strength is not falling, but sometimes strength is letting someone hold you when you do." Keanu nodded, voice low. "And sometimes kindness is not lifting someone up. It is sitting beside them until they can stand again." They both looked out at the city once more, but it did not feel distant anymore. It felt shared. No cameras, no crowd, no acting. Just two people who had carried pain and now carried understanding. They walked back toward the rooftop door, not as broken actors, not as celebrities, not as two people pretending to be fine, but as two humans who learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply staying, and that whisper, "Thank you for staying," would live in Keanu's heart longer than any award, script, or headline ever could. The night did not end with applause. It ended with peace.